Did you always want to work in the CBD industry, or did you just like happen to land a job at a CBD company?
Yeah, originally I wanted to be in biopharmaceuticals, and then right before college graduation, reached out to me over LinkedIn, and I hadn't really given the CBD industry much thought, but I really liked the idea of a startup, and I kind of liked the hands-on science. Grassroots people don't know what's going on with CBD and THC right now, so that was really what made me kind of take that. I wouldn't say I've kind of been looking for it my whole life, so I kind of just happened to fall into it, started to enjoy it.
If you have a buddy that works as a chemical engineer, but he works for a big company, how does his job compare to yours?
I would say a lot of my chemical engineer friends that are actually in a job called chemical engineering, it's all smaller companies. Anytime you get to a bigger company, you kind of turn into a process engineer, which is more of just optimizing basically plant processes, which would be kind of a different route. The smaller company chemical engineers are a lot more kind of designing systems from the ground up and kind of being incorporated in that entire aspect, whereas a larger company who would hire a chemical engineer would normally hire them as a process engineer, which is basically just, okay, optimize this current plant that we have in place and kind of make adjustments as time goes on. That's more what I've seen from my process engineer friends, but they do have degrees in chemical engineering.
When you say like they make changes to like a plant, you mean like a power plant or something, or a chemical plant?
Normally it's either petroleum, a biorefinery, any sort of chemical process plants normally, anything that would have distillation columns or membranes or any sort of chemical purification, large-scale chemical purification process, mostly oil and gas is where a lot of people see it.
Gotcha. And when they change the process, are they doing it to like make the plant more efficient, or are they trying to make a profit?
It's always about optimizing costs at that scale. They're not really doing design updates for the sake of design. It's more how can we cut costs here. Like when I was in chemical engineering, all of my professors would say half your job is going to be like an engineering economist, basically. And that, we had to take 3 economics classes about how to kind of do that type of thing. I haven't really seen that because I'm a smaller company, but all of my process engineer, chemical engineer friends, definitely that's a huge part of their job.
So in the chemical engineering field, would you say that there's a big need to relocate based on job availability? In other words, are the chemical engineering jobs only in like certain parts of the country where you would need to relocate, or are they kind of all spread around and there's going to be jobs no matter where you live?
Chemical engineers, I would say 70% of chemical engineers go into oil and gas. And so because that was kind of just the path that was laid out, I was already looking into those kind of directions anyways, and Colorado is definitely not a place where oil and gas is. So pretty much my options, before I even took this job, I pretty much thought either oil and gas or pharmaceuticals are my only two. Pharmaceuticals, there's really nothing in Colorado either. That was all California and Washington. And oil and gas was all either the Permian, kind of the Wyoming, Texas area. So really, it was pretty fortunate that I actually got this CBD job because pretty much everything else I would have had to have moved away for.
So were you prepared though to make a move after college?
Yeah, right when I left college, we basically just sold the house that all of my roommates had in college, so I didn't really have any place I needed to be. I was just basically living at my parents for like the month interim after college, just waiting for what I wanted to do. So I was pretty much prepared to go anywhere. I just really liked Colorado in the first place, so I didn't want to leave. But if I had to, I would have.
Where do you see yourself in 5 years?
5 years, I really, after this job, it kind of cemented the idea that I really wanted to go more the technical route rather than the management route. So I'm really hoping I'd like to mostly in 5 years lead kind of a research team. That would be kind of my goal, but because I don't have a master's or a PhD, that may be tough. But that's ideally what I'd want to be in.
Do you see yourself going back for a master's?
So right now I'm looking at larger companies, specifically if they have kind of a master's program, that would be an option for me, because it's definitely kind of a pretty big goal of mine to stay away from the management side, because having just a straight bachelor's degree is tough to get more technical. Yeah, I think it would definitely be beneficial, but I don't think I'd go back and pay for it on my own specifically.
What advice would you have for anyone that would be interested in a job like yours?
Biggest thing I would say is research the underlying science of it initially, because it's so, especially for the CBD industry, because it's so new, A lot of people aren't really expecting a newer graduate or a newer employee to know much. And that was definitely a big help for me, is when I came in and already kind of understood the science of alcohol-based extraction. That was really kind of what cemented me to get the job instantly. So even if, you do like 45 minutes to an hour of just basic, what is the chemical mechanism working here, it's going to be a huge help to any sort of interview. My job before, I kind of had the same idea of researching, but I researched more of what the company does and what the products do, rather than how I could apply myself to that job in the first place. And I think the biggest benefit is, instead of researching just what the company does to show that you know what the company does, research how the company does those things, so you can kind of give a value added of how you can kind of input your take into that system, I would say.
Are there any certifications or licenses that would be useful, like in your job or in your field?
Anything like a PE, especially because you'd be able to do third-party reviews for kind of all these CBD and THC companies, because they're building things up from the ground up. Everything is needing to be third-party reviewed from an external company. So if somebody had a PE already and they could basically be an in-house third-party reviewer, that would be a huge help, I would say, to any up-and-coming company.
And did you always want this type of career, or was there anything else that you were ever interested in?
Yeah, so when I was like a really small kid, I knew I wanted to be an engineer instantly, and I built a bunch of crap 24/7 when I was, between 8 and 12. And then when I hit 12, I decided I wanted to completely switch and become a veterinarian. And up until basically junior year of high school, I had thought I wanted to be a veterinarian. And then I don't really know what changed, but I just completely switched directions again after I took an AP Chem class and then went back into engineering. I originally wanted to be a mechanical engineer, actually, but after taking Chem, it kind of solidified going into chemical engineering.
Do you ever have to do any traveling for your job?
Yeah, I would normally travel once or twice a month, probably out of state, and then probably 3 or 4 times a month in state, just driving roughly an hour anywhere for either equipment installs or working at the pilot plant that my company is currently testing out right now. But nothing too crazy.
Do you mind telling us how much you make?
Yeah, so I was making 65 with a 5K bonus a year, so 70 combined.
Do you work with other people that have a similar education background to yours?
Yeah, so whenever I'm actually not in my company specifically, I'm the only person with any sort of chemical background. But anytime we're doing initial kind of client interactions, I would always be talking to their engineer, and kind of he normally would have a good idea of how he wants his process laid out. And then normally I would kind of move in and see how we could get around his original chemical process idea. So I definitely do have a lot of interactions with some other chemical engineers, but not really within my company itself. It's normally with clients.
And was there anything you did in college or high school that you would recommend other people do?
I would say definitely any sort of in high school, any sort of tech or robotics, just any sort of hands-on mechanical class. Because even as a chemical engineer, especially in growing industries like this, you're going to have to get your hands dirty no matter what. And that was a kind of huge learning curve for me, was jumping in. And I'd never really gotten much experience with turning wrenches other than working on my cars. So I think if I would have come in with a lot more hands-on mechanical experience of how things work in the real world, that would have been huge for me.